The air was thick with static, a strange unearthly hum reverberating through the room. The protagonist, Liam, had been sitting at his desk, eyes glazed over as he stared at the blinking lights of his computer screen. His hands were frozen, hovering over the keyboard, waiting for a message that would never come. It was supposed to be just another day, but then, the transmission began. At first it was a pulse, sharp, jarring, and then a voice, low and guttural, cut through the confusion like a blade. "They're already here." The words were cold, unyielding. They didn't sound human. They didn't sound like anything he had ever heard before. His heart skipped a beat as his breath hitched, a feeling of dread creeping into his chest. The world outside had been peaceful, but now, it felt as though everything had shifted. A part of him wanted to dismiss it, to pretend it was just a glitch, but the weight of the words kept him rooted to the spot. Something was happening, something that would change everything. As Liam processed the message, he could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "They're already here." The words echoed in his mind, and the sense of impending doom grew heavier by the second. He knew that whatever was coming, it wasn't going to be good. Outside his window, the city was alive with movement, but the sky above seemed darker than before, heavy with the unknown. In that instant, a chilling realization struck him. This was only the beginning. Chaos had already begun, and Liam had just become a part of it. He couldn't help but wonder, though, if anyone else had heard the same thing, or if it was just him. But it was too late to turn back now. The world had already begun its descent into madness, and Liam had no choice but to brace himself for whatever came next. Liam sat frozen at his desk, the static on the screen still crackling in his ears, the words of the transmission lingering in the air like an unshakable cloud. He couldn't understand what had just happened. He wasn't sure if it was real or just a mistake. His breath came in shallow gasps as he turned his head slowly to the window, staring at the storm that had begun to form in the sky above the city. Was it connected? Was the storm somehow part of the message? It was all too much to process. His hands hovered over the keyboard, and for a moment he wanted to slam the keys, demand answers from the screen, but the fear held him back. "They're already here." The words were taunting, chilling, and it felt as though they had dug themselves deep into his mind. Liam's thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of it. Why him? Why had this message come to him? Why now? Was he supposed to do something? The city outside continued its usual hum, unaware of the nightmare unfolding. But for Liam, everything had changed. He felt alone, isolated in his thoughts, unsure who to trust or even if anyone would believe him. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. And no one seemed to be prepared for it. Slowly Liam stood up, his legs shaky, his body heavy with a sense of dread that he couldn't shake off. The world outside the window was still the same, but it no longer felt safe. There was something in the air now, a tension that had never been there before, and Liam couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. With every heartbeat, the realization grew stronger. Whatever had just started, it was going to change everything. Liam's thoughts were a blur. He walked over to the window, his feet dragging as though weighed down by the enormity of what had just happened. The storm outside had intensified, the wind howling as the dark clouds swirled above the city. It was as if the very world was reacting to the alien message, mirroring his growing sense of dread. The transmission had been clear, unyielding, but the purpose behind it was anything but. What did it mean? What did "they're already here" mean? The storm outside mirrored the chaos in his mind. He reached for his phone, his fingers trembling as he unlocked it, but he hesitated. Would anyone believe him? Would they think he was losing his mind? No one would understand. He couldn't shake the image of the strange, distorted figure that had flashed on the screen, its eyes burning with an unnatural intensity. He had to know more. He had to find answers. But how? The city outside remained oblivious to the events unfolding. Life continued as normal, but Liam knew deep in his bones that everything had shifted. He couldn't just ignore this. The message wasn't a warning, it was a challenge, one that demanded action, and Liam didn't know if he was ready for what came next. The storm outside continued to rage, and for the first time, Liam felt a deep sense of fear for the world he once knew. It was no longer the same. Liam's breath quickened as he stepped back from the window, unable to tear his eyes away from the raging storm. He was no longer certain of what was real and what was illusion. His phone remained in his hand, a lifeline to the world outside his thoughts, but he had no idea who to call. What would he say? "I think the aliens have arrived." No one would take him seriously. Still, he couldn't let this moment slip away. He needed answers. Every instinct in him screamed to run, to escape, but where would he go? There was nowhere safe from whatever was coming. Liam turned back to the desk and sat down, his hands resting on the keyboard, staring at the screen in front of him. The words "they're already here" flashed in his mind again, and he felt a sinking feeling in his stomach. The world felt different now, as though something unseen was moving just beneath the surface. The city outside continued to bustle, unaware of the impending threat. Liam felt like an outsider in his own life. He wanted to do something, anything, but the weight of uncertainty held him in place. What was his role in this? What was expected of him? His mind raced, but he knew deep down that no matter how much he tried to push it away, the truth was undeniable. Something was happening. The message had been clear, and it was only the beginning. Whatever was coming, it was coming for all of them. As Liam sat in silence, the storm outside seemed to grow louder, the wind battering the windows, rattling the glass as if it were trying to break in. He had no answers, no solutions. All he had was the knowledge that something was happening, and there was no escaping it. His mind drifted back to the message, the words that had shaken him to his core. "They're already here." It was a declaration, a fact, not a warning. Whoever, or whatever was out there had already made their presence known. The realization hit him harder than he expected. He was part of something much larger, something he had never prepared for. The familiar world he once knew seemed to be slipping away, replaced by an overwhelming sense of dread. There was no turning back now. He had to figure out what this was, what it all meant, but even that seemed impossible. As Liam rose from the desk and walked to the window again, he felt the weight of the world pressing down on him. The storm outside had become a symbol of the chaos that now threatened to consume everything. It was clear to him now, nothing would ever be the same. The world was changing. He was changing. Liam couldn't shake the unease that had settled deep within him. The world felt increasingly unfamiliar as his thoughts churned over the transmission. "They're already here." It was all he could hear, all he could think about. He had tried reaching out to trusted friends and family, but no one seemed to grasp the gravity of what he had witnessed. The more he researched, the clearer it became. The aliens weren't just invading, they had been here for far longer than anyone could imagine. His laptop screen was filled with government reports, documents he'd never expected to find, detailing unusual occurrences and cover-ups that spanned decades. There was a hidden history he'd never been taught, a history that involved the very people he had once trusted. Every piece of information painted a picture of deep conspiracies, shadow organizations, and secret dealings. As Liam continued to dig, the darkness only deepened. The government had known about the aliens for years, hiding their existence from the public, manipulating humanity's progress, and controlling the flow of information. He felt his grip on reality slipping, each new discovery sending ripples of disbelief through his mind. The city outside his apartment felt further away, as though the world he once knew was no longer his. His role in this unfolding disaster was unclear, but one thing was certain: he couldn't walk away. The truth had been unearthed, and Liam was left to face the consequences of a revelation that could not be ignored. With the weight of the world on his shoulders, he knew there was no turning back. Liam's hands trembled as he clicked through the files, his eyes scanning page after page. The documents detailed hidden government operations, collaborations with extraterrestrial entities, and classified scientific research. The patterns were undeniable. For decades, humanity had been kept in the dark, its leaders making deals with the aliens for power, technology, and control. The most disturbing revelation was that these covert dealings didn't stop at governments or corporations. The conspiracy had its hands deep in the fabric of human history. What had once seemed like a simple alien invasion was now revealed to be part of an elaborate plan, one that spanned centuries. The documents spoke of the manipulation of world events, the creation of false histories, and the systematic erasure of key information from humanity's collective memory. What frightened Liam the most was the realization that the aliens were not the enemy. They were merely pawns in a game much larger than anyone had anticipated. The true enemy, he discovered, was humanity itself. The powerful factions that had conspired with the aliens were just as much a threat as the invaders. They had used humanity's ignorance for their own gains, and now the planet was on the brink of an unimaginable war. Liam's thoughts spiraled as he realized that the government had been setting up humanity for something far more insidious. His role in all of this was unclear, but one truth remained. The battle wasn't just against the aliens. It was against those who had manipulated humanity all along. Liam sat back in his chair, the weight of the discovery crushing him. His mind raced, unable to reconcile the fact that the very government he had trusted was complicit in the alien conspiracy. It was no longer a matter of survival against invaders. The real battle lay within the system that had perpetuated the lie for so long. He thought about the people in power, the leaders who had betrayed their own species for personal gain. But it wasn't just the government. His closest friend David had been silent during the last few weeks, acting distant and withdrawn. It wasn't like him at all. Liam's suspicions began to grow, and a seed of doubt was planted. Had David known? Was he part of this conspiracy? The thought made his stomach turn. He couldn't ignore the feeling that the people he trusted were no longer who they seemed to be. As Liam sat there staring at the glowing screen, he was struck by a thought that filled him with dread. If the government had been working with the aliens all along, what else had they hidden from the public? The answer was terrifying. The truth was far more than just alien technology or military collaboration. It was the foundation of human history itself, rewritten to serve an agenda far beyond anyone's comprehension. But now Liam knew he had no choice. He had to confront this truth, no matter the cost. He wasn't sure how or where to start, but he understood one thing. This was just the beginning of something much bigger. Liam's world began to unravel in front of him. His search for answers had led him to an unimaginable conclusion. Someone close to him was involved in the conspiracy. The revelation hit him like a punch to the gut. The face of the enemy was no longer just a faceless government or alien entity. It was someone he knew, someone he trusted. The betrayal was beyond comprehension. His mind reeled as he replayed every conversation with David, every moment they had shared. How had he missed the signs? David had always been supportive, always by his side. But what if he had been playing a role? The thought made Liam's head spin. How could he trust anyone now? As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Liam realized that the scope of this conspiracy was far greater than he could have imagined. The alien invasion was just the final step in a carefully orchestrated plan, one that had been unfolding for generations. Liam didn't know what to do next. He was no longer sure who to turn to, who to trust. All he knew was that he had to confront David, to demand answers. But as he thought about what would happen if the truth came out, fear gnawed at him. If David was truly part of this conspiracy, exposing him could destroy everything. But could Liam live with the knowledge that someone close to him had betrayed humanity for their own gain? Liam's heart raced as he approached David's apartment, his mind whirling with questions. He wasn't sure what he expected, but he knew this confrontation was inevitable. The door to David's apartment stood in front of him, ordinary, unassuming, but Liam couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed. He knocked, the sound echoing through the hallway, and waited. When the door opened, David's expression was unreadable. He looked tired, worn, but there was something else in his eyes, a flicker of recognition, of understanding. It was then that Liam knew, deep down, that his suspicions were correct. David wasn't just a bystander, he was a player in this game. The betrayal was real. Liam, David said, his voice low, almost apologetic. But Liam wasn't ready to hear excuses. How long? He demanded, his voice barely a whisper. David hesitated, his eyes shifting nervously, and for the first time, Liam saw the fear in his friend's eyes. The truth was about to be exposed, but as the weight of the moment crashed down on him, Liam couldn't help but wonder if he had just walked into a trap. Liam's breath was shallow as he stood in front of the crumbling government facility. He had spent weeks researching, uncovering piece after piece of information that painted a bleak picture of the world around him. The reality he had known was slowly slipping away, replaced by an insidious truth. The government's secrecy, the aliens, the betrayal. It was all coming to a head. His mind raced as he stepped into the building, the dim flickering lights overhead casting long, unsettling shadows. The air smelled of dust and stale secrecy, a place long abandoned to its lies. Inside, the halls were quiet, eerily so, as if the facility itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Liam knew this was no longer just about exposing the truth. It was about survival. The more he uncovered, the more he realized the stakes had risen beyond anything he had imagined. The people he had once trusted, those closest to him, were not just innocent victims. They were players in a larger game, one he had unwittingly joined. And David, his closest friend, had been at the heart of this conspiracy. The realization hit Liam like a punch to the gut. His entire life had been a lie. Now, standing in the belly of the beast, he understood just how deep the betrayal ran. The government, the aliens, and the sleeper agents, they were all connected, and this facility was the epicenter of it all. But Liam had no time to dwell on that now. He had come too far to back out. Every step he took in the sterile, silent halls brought him closer to a truth that would change everything. But the question remained, would he be able to survive the storm he was about to unleash? Liam moved cautiously through the facility, each step echoing in the silence. The deeper he went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It felt as though the walls themselves were closing in on him, keeping the secrets of the world hidden within their cold concrete structure. He approached a room marked classified, the sign flickering weakly in the dim light. This was it, the heart of the conspiracy, the place where everything had been orchestrated. He swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his mission bearing down on him. He had to see the truth for himself. He had to expose what had been kept hidden from humanity. The door creaked open, revealing a room filled with monitors, blinking lights, and rows of files. Everything looked meticulously organized, as though someone had been here recently. He approached the central desk, where a terminal stood, waiting. With trembling hands, he typed in the access code he had stolen from the security files. The screen flickered to life, revealing footage of meetings, private conversations, and secret transactions between government officials and alien representatives. Liam's stomach churned as he watched the betrayal unfold on the screen. They had been planning this for decades, using the aliens as tools, manipulating the very fabric of human history. It was worse than he could have imagined. The truth was horrifying, but it was undeniable. He was too deep in now, too far gone to turn back. But with the knowledge came a new sense of purpose. He had to stop this before it was too late. Liam felt his heart pounding as he processed the footage. The realization of how deeply the conspiracy had infiltrated his life hit him like a wave. His trust had been shattered, not just by the government, but by David, the one person he had believed was his ally. He had always suspected something was off, but he never imagined the depths of the betrayal. As the footage continued to play, Liam saw faces he recognized, people who had been part of his life, unknowingly complicit in the conspiracy. It made him sick to his core. But the more he watched, the more determined he became. There was no going back now. The pieces were all in place. The world had been manipulated, controlled, and Liam was the only one who could expose it all. His hands shook as he continued to watch, each new clip adding to the weight of the truth. He had to find David. He had to confront him. There was no more room for doubt. But with that confrontation came an overwhelming sense of fear. If David was involved in this, what else had he hidden? What else was Liam not seeing? The storm of questions in his mind only grew stronger as the footage continued to reveal secrets that had been buried for far too long. Liam knew he had no choice but to confront David to get the answers he so desperately needed. But the truth came at a cost. And Liam wasn't sure if he was ready to pay it. Liam closed his eyes for a moment, trying to steady his breathing. The truth had hit him harder than he expected. Everything he had known, everything he had believed, was a lie. The images on the screen continued to haunt him, flashing in his mind as he tried to process the magnitude of what had been uncovered. The government had been in bed with the aliens for decades, controlling the narrative and manipulating world events for their own gain. But the most shocking part was that David had known about it all along. His closest friend, the person he had trusted above all others, had been a part of it. A deep sense of betrayal washed over him, and the anger that followed was almost unbearable. He couldn't just let this go. He had to act. Liam knew what he had to do. He had to expose this conspiracy to the world, even if it meant destroying everything he had worked for. His heart raced as he grabbed the stack of documents on the desk, his hands still shaking from the adrenaline coursing through his body. This was it. This was the moment where everything changed. He wasn't going to let them get away with it. He was going to fight back, no matter the cost. The truth had to be heard. And Liam was the one who would make sure of it. Liam made his way to David's apartment, the final confrontation looming in his mind. He had no idea what to expect, but he knew that this was the moment of truth. The door to David's apartment loomed ahead, and as he reached out to knock, his hand trembled. What would David say? Would he confess, or would he deny everything? As the door creaked open, Liam's breath caught in his throat. There was David, standing in the doorway, looking as though he had been expecting this moment for a long time. The silence between them stretched, both men unsure of how to begin. But Liam didn't wait. He stepped forward, his voice low but firm. "How long?" he asked. David's face fell, a brief flicker of guilt crossing his features before he closed his eyes. "I didn't want this for you," he said, his voice barely a whisper. But Liam could see the truth in his eyes. It was over. The friendship, the trust, they were all gone now. This was no longer about loyalty. It was about survival. And Liam had no choice but to face the consequences of this betrayal. The air in the underground facility felt damp and cold as Liam ventured deeper into the heart of the conspiracy. His body trembled, not from the chill, but from the weight of the truth he was about to uncover. The walls seemed to close in around him, the faint hum of machinery reverberating in his ears as his footsteps echoed through the dark corridors. He had seen the footage, the documents, and the whispered conversations. But nothing prepared him for what lay ahead. The final piece of the puzzle was within his reach, and yet, the closer he came, the more he could feel the weight of the decisions he would soon have to make. It was clear now. The government wasn't simply in collusion with the alien forces. They had been manipulated by them, controlled by a much larger and more ancient power. The aliens had been guiding humanity's evolution, pushing civilization toward a singular goal, one that had nothing to do with the survival of Earth's people. The truth was darker than Liam could have ever imagined. The aliens weren't just invaders, they were the architects of humanity's future. This facility, buried deep beneath the city, was where the final stage of the plan was about to be enacted. The secrets that had been buried for decades were about to rise to the surface. Liam's heart raced as he realized that he had come too far to back out. The alien presence on Earth had been part of a larger, more cosmic design, one that he was now intricately tied to. The final confrontation was upon him. There was no turning back. Liam's breath caught in his throat as he approached the control room. Behind the thick glass, a large screen displayed live footage of alien beings, their forms twisting and shifting in ways that defied human understanding. Their faces, partly obscured by the shadows, were cold and calculating. He could feel their eyes on him, even though they couldn't see him through the glass. The truth of their power was undeniable. They had been manipulating humanity's fate for generations, carefully guiding the world toward their own agenda. The documents he had uncovered earlier only scratched the surface. The facility's true purpose wasn't just to store information. It was the control center of a much larger plan. Liam watched as scientists, some of whom he had known personally, worked in tandem with the aliens. They were no longer human in the truest sense of the word. They were collaborators in the alien agenda. The realization hit him hard. There were no innocents here. Every decision, every life that had been lost in the pursuit of knowledge, was part of this greater design. The aliens had embedded themselves within human society, and now they were pulling the strings from behind the scenes. The truth about his family's involvement was clearer now. His bloodline wasn't just a victim of circumstance. They were pawns in this cosmic game. Liam's hands clenched into fists as anger and betrayal surged through him. He couldn't just stand by anymore. He had to expose this truth, no matter the cost. The more Liam watched, the more he realized the extent of the alien control. The governments of the world weren't just aware of the alien presence, they were complicit in the grand design. Alien technology had been integrated into every aspect of human life, from energy sources to military advancements. But the most chilling part was the revelation of the alien agenda. The Earth was not their final destination. It had always been a stepping stone, a means to an end. The aliens had been preparing humanity for something far worse. The true nature of their plan was to use Earth as a staging ground for an intergalactic conquest, one that would involve not just Earth, but entire galaxy. Liam's mind spun with the enormity of it all. He had come here searching for answers, but what he had found was a cosmic war that had been quietly waged for centuries. The thought of billions of lives at risk, of humanity being nothing more than pawns in a much larger game, filled him with dread. But there was a spark of hope too. If he could expose this truth, if he could somehow wake the world up to what was happening, perhaps there was still a chance to turn the tide. But first, he had to confront the ones who had been hiding these secrets, the very people who had been manipulating him all along. His heart raced as he realized the final confrontation was inevitable, and it was coming soon. As Liam stepped deeper into the heart of the facility, he encountered more than just the aliens. The scientists, the high-ranking officials, and the collaborators, their faces were familiar, but their allegiances were anything but. His mind reeled as he realized the vast scope of the operation. They had been manipulating not just the course of human history, but the very genetic makeup of humanity itself. Genetic modifications, extraterrestrial technology, integrated into human biology. All of it was part of a plan to create a hybrid race that would be compatible with the aliens' own species. The thought was horrifying. Liam felt a surge of nausea, but he couldn't turn back now. The evidence was clear, and he was standing in the very heart of the conspiracy. He was no longer just a bystander. He had become part of this war, whether he liked it or not. His bloodline had been part of the plan all along, manipulated by the alien forces. The realization sank in. His connection to this conspiracy wasn't just personal, it was genetic. He was both a pawn and a weapon in this cosmic game. And now, he had to make the choice: expose the truth to the world and risk chaos, or remain silent and live with the knowledge that humanity was doomed. His hands trembled as he realized that the decision was in his hands. Whatever happened next, the world would never be the same. Liam stood in the center of the facility, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He had seen enough. The world had been manipulated from the shadows, and the alien agenda had been set in motion long before he had even understood the scope of it. His family's involvement, his bloodline, it was all part of the plan. But now, the final confrontation loomed. The stakes had never been higher, and as the alien forces prepared to make their move, Liam realized that the world was at the precipice of something far darker than anyone could have imagined. If he didn't act, humanity would become nothing more than an expendable resource in the aliens' grand scheme. But if he exposed the truth, the world would be thrown into chaos. People would panic, governments would crumble, and the very fabric of society would unravel. The cost of revealing the truth was immeasurable, but the cost of silence was even greater. He knew what he had to do. The decision had been made. The world had to know the truth, no matter what it would cost him. He would take the consequences. He would bear the weight of humanity's future. But first, he had to confront the aliens and the people who had brought him to this point. He couldn't wait any longer. Liam stood at the edge of the city, watching the horizon slowly darken as alien ships descended from the sky, casting long shadows over the streets below. The world had changed in the blink of an eye, and the full force of the alien invasion was now evident. For weeks, he had fought against the unseen forces that had manipulated humanity, but now the time for subterfuge was over. The time for action had arrived. His body felt heavy, the weight of the knowledge he had uncovered pressing down on him. The world didn't know what was coming, but it would soon be forced to face the truth. Liam had always been an ordinary man, but today he would stand as the last line of defense against a tide of destruction. The plan he had set in motion was risky, but it was humanity's only chance. As the alien fleet loomed overhead, Liam could feel the heartbeat of the city beneath his feet. The streets were alive with chaos, people running in every direction, unsure where to go or who to trust. In the distance, the military was mobilizing, but Liam knew it would take more than just brute force to win this war. It was a war of minds, a war of deception, and Liam was about to make his final move. With the alien technology he had acquired, the tide could be turned, but at a steep price. The stakes were higher than ever before, and there was no turning back. The first wave of alien forces touched down, and the battle for humanity's future began. Liam's mind raced as he sprinted through the city's underground tunnels, the hum of alien technology vibrating in the walls around him. He had a plan, but it was far from foolproof. The government had underestimated the alien presence for too long, and now humanity was paying the price. The streets above were teeming with panicked citizens, some fighting back, others running for their lives. But Liam knew the real battle wasn't on the streets, it was beneath them, in the hidden chambers of the alien-controlled facility. There, the heart of the invasion lay, and it was up to him to destroy it. His breathing came fast as he neared the heart of the underground complex, the walls pulsing with an eerie glow. The alien technology was everywhere, seamlessly integrated into the infrastructure. It was almost as if the aliens had been here long before the invasion, waiting, preparing. Liam reached the control room, where a massive holographic map displayed the alien forces' movements in real time. Sweat dripped from his brow as he analyzed the data, knowing that the fate of the world rested on his next move. He had to infiltrate the alien core and disable their communication network before they could fully activate their invasion force. But time was running out. The city above was already beginning to feel the full brunt of the attack. Liam moved quickly through the maze of corridors, his heart pounding in his chest. The alien core was just ahead, the last obstacle between him and the salvation of humanity. But as he approached the final chamber, he could feel the weight of what he was about to do. If he succeeded, the alien forces would be thrown into disarray, their communication network crippled. But if he failed, it would mean the end of Earth's resistance, and humanity would be enslaved. The room ahead was dimly lit, the air thick with the sound of alien machinery whirring softly in the background. Liam could see the pulsating core, its tendrils reaching out like an organic brain, controlling the flow of energy to the entire facility. This was the heart of the alien invasion, and if he could destroy it, he would turn the tide of the war. He approached the core, his hands shaking as he prepared to initiate the shutdown sequence. The weight of the decision pressed heavily on him. He was about to make the ultimate sacrifice for humanity. As the countdown began, Liam braced himself for the chaos that would follow. But just as he activated the sequence, an explosion rocked the facility. The lights flickered, and the ground trembled beneath him. The invasion had escalated beyond anyone's control. Liam's heart raced as he realized that the war had just entered its final, most dangerous phase. The explosion sent Liam flying across the room, his body crashing into the wall with bone-shaking force. For a moment, everything was a blur of pain and disorientation. His head spun as he pushed himself to his feet, barely able to comprehend what had just happened. The facility was falling apart around him, the alien machinery sparking and groaning under the strain. He could hear the chaos outside, screams, explosions, and the unmistakable roar of alien ships engaging the military. The invasion was no longer a distant threat, it was happening now, and the world was on the brink of collapse. But, despite the chaos, Liam knew he had one last chance to turn the tide. His mission was far from over. He had to reach the surface, find the command center, and stop the alien forces from initiating the final phase of their invasion. His legs felt weak, but he pushed forward, his determination overriding the pain. He stumbled through the facility, dodging falling debris and evading alien patrols. Each step took him closer to the surface, closer to the final confrontation that would determine humanity's fate. As he reached the exit, the sounds of the war outside grew louder, and Liam knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Liam burst into the command center, his heart racing, and the full scale of the war laid out before him. Alien ships filled the skies, raining destruction down on the city below. The military had made a stand, but the alien forces were too powerful. In the center of the chaos, Liam saw a familiar face. David, standing beside an alien commander. The betrayal cut deeper than ever before. He had known it would come to this, but seeing it in front of him made it all too real. David turned to face him, his expression unreadable. "You should have joined us," David said coldly. "This is the future of humanity." Liam's eyes narrowed as he took in the full scope of the situation. There was no more time for questions. The world needed a leader, someone who could stand against the aliens, someone who could unite the forces of humanity. And it wasn't David. It was Liam. With a fierce roar, Liam charged forward, determined to stop the alien forces no matter the cost. The final battle had begun, and humanity's fate rested in his hands. The battle was over, but the world had already been irrevocably changed. The skies once filled with alien ships were now silent, save for the distant rumblings of the cities below. Humanity had fought back, but the victory came at a heavy cost. Liam stood among the ruins, surveying the damage. The once thriving metropolis was now a shell of its former self, buildings reduced to rubble, streets scorched by the alien weapons that had been used in the final assault. It was hard to believe that only hours ago, people had gone about their lives as if everything was normal. Now, nothing was the same. The alien forces were gone, driven back by a coalition of military and civilian resistance, but the scars left by their presence were everywhere. The sense of victory felt hollow. Liam had lost so much: friends, allies, even his sense of self. As he walked through the debris, he couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was forever changed, irrevocably altered by the forces that had come from beyond the stars. He had uncovered the truth, fought to expose the alien conspiracy, and in the end, helped drive the invaders back, but the price of it all was steep. The survivors gathered in small groups, helping one another, salvaging what they could from the wreckage. Some were mourning their dead, others were too stunned to process what had just happened. But Liam knew that they would rebuild. Humanity always did. The truth was out now, and the world would have to face it. There would be no going back to the old way of life. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: this was just the beginning. The city was in a state of shock, its pulse slow and erratic, as the survivors began the long process of recovery. Liam walked among them, trying to help where he could, but his mind kept drifting back to the final moments of the battle. The defeat of the alien forces had been swift, but not without sacrifice. Thousands of lives had been lost, both in the cities and on the battlefield. The true cost of this war was still being calculated. But the greater toll was psychological. How would humanity recover from knowing that they were never truly alone in the universe? The truth that had been hidden for so long now lay bare for all to see. Governments, once trusted to protect their people, had been complicit in the alien agenda. The shockwaves from the revelation were still reverberating. Liam had become a symbol of resistance, of the fight for truth, but it was a hollow title. He knew that, in the coming weeks and months, the world would need to heal, to rebuild, but that process would be long and painful. The alien threat had been neutralized, but the emotional scars would last much longer. As Liam walked past the survivors, he could see the fear in their eyes. Fear of the unknown, fear of what the truth meant for their future. And there was no easy answer. He had done what he could, fought for humanity's survival. But now it was up to the people to decide what came next. The road ahead was uncertain, and as much as he wanted to give them hope, he couldn't promise them that everything would return to normal. Not after what they had all just been through. In the days that followed, the world slowly began to piece itself back together. The governments, now exposed for their role in the alien conspiracy, were in disarray. Some collapsed entirely, while others tried to salvage what remained of their power. But the people weren't waiting for their leaders to act. They took to the streets, demanding accountability and transparency. The world had seen the truth, and they weren't going to go back to a life of lies. The truth about the aliens and the hidden war they had been waging for decades had left its mark on the global psyche. Trust in authority had been shattered, and as governments tried to recover, they faced an entirely new kind of resistance, one born from the shared trauma of the people. For Liam, it was a difficult time. He was hailed as a hero by many, but to him, the victory was bittersweet. The loss of life, the betrayal, the revelations, it was all too much to bear. As he sat alone in the ruins of a once bustling city square, he wondered if humanity would ever fully recover from the horrors they had faced. He had fought for a future where humans could stand tall against the unknown, but now the future seemed more uncertain than ever. There was no going back to the way things were. The world had been irrevocably changed. And as Liam looked up at the sky, he couldn't help but wonder what the future held, not just for Earth, but for the rest of the universe. Weeks passed, and the world started to adapt to its new reality. The alien threat was gone, but the truth had left a wound that would take much longer to heal. Liam had become a reluctant symbol of humanity's fight for survival, but he was not the man he had once been. The victories felt empty, and every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of those who had been lost. The faces of the innocent, the loved ones he had failed to protect. He had given everything in the fight to expose the truth, but the cost was more than he had ever imagined. The war wasn't just against the aliens, it was against the lies that had been embedded in the world for centuries. The struggle to rebuild was not just physical but emotional, psychological. Trust, once lost, would not easily be regained. And as Liam moved through the crowded streets of a recovering city, he could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. People looked to him for answers, for guidance, but all he could offer was a quiet resolve to keep moving forward. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he was determined to help shape it, to help humanity find its way after the darkness that had threatened to consume them all. But the question remained, could they ever truly rebuild, or was the cost of truth too high to bear? As time passed, the world began to rebuild, but the scars left by the invasion remained. Governments changed, new leaders rose, and the people began to forge a new path forward. But in the hearts of many, the truth remained, a truth that would shape the future for generations to come. For Liam, the journey was far from over. He had played his part, but the road ahead would be long and uncertain. As he stood on a hill overlooking the city, he could see the small steps humanity had taken to rebuild. The city was still scarred, but life was returning. People were gathering, helping one another, and rebuilding what had been lost. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The horizon stretched out before him, and for the first time in a long while, Liam felt a glimmer of hope. The fight was over, but the work had only just begun. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew that humanity, though scarred, would keep fighting. And so would he. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a blood-red glow over the horizon. Liam stood alone, gazing across the barren landscape that had once been a bustling metropolis. The final battle had come and gone, but the war was far from over. Alien ships had been driven back, but they were not defeated. The truth about the extraterrestrial influence on Earth had been revealed, and now, humanity was caught in a war for its very survival. But it wasn't just the aliens that threatened humanity, it was the human factions who had worked with them. Those who had profited from the alien conspiracy were still out there, and they were not going to let their power slip away without a fight. Liam's heart weighed heavy with the knowledge that this was just the beginning. He had fought for the truth, exposed the lies, and helped humanity push back the invaders, but the world was still fractured. The governments, once trusted to protect their people, were now in chaos, and the survivors of the invasion were left to pick up the pieces. As Liam looked out at the distant smoke rising from the remains of the city, he knew that the next phase of the war had already begun. Humanity would need to come together, not just to survive, but to rebuild. And that meant fighting not only against the alien forces, but also the corrupt human systems that had allowed them to take root. But where would that fight lead? What would the future hold for those who had survived the invasion? Liam didn't have the answers, but he knew one thing for sure. There would be no return to the world they once knew. The war for Earth's future was just beginning. Liam's footsteps echoed through the empty streets as he moved deeper into the heart of the city. The survivors, weary and uncertain, were still trying to rebuild, but there was an underlying tension in the air. The alien threat had been repelled, but the real battle was now within humanity itself. The divisions that had been hidden for years were now exposed, and the people were struggling to find common ground. Trust had been shattered, and the fight for survival was now a fight for unity. As Liam passed by small groups of survivors, he could see the distrust in their eyes. Some wanted to rebuild, to start fresh, while others were driven by anger and vengeance, eager to punish those who had colluded with the aliens. There were whispers of new factions forming, human factions, not alien ones, and Liam knew that this was just the beginning of a much larger conflict. The alien forces had been just one piece of the puzzle, and now that humanity had seen the truth, the power dynamics were shifting in ways no one could have predicted. For Liam, the choice was clear. He had to help guide humanity through the chaos, but how? The questions weighed on him as he continued through the streets, knowing that the true test of humanity's resilience was about to begin. The future was uncertain, but Liam knew that the survival of the human race depended on the choices they made in the coming days. The weeks following the invasion had been a blur of reconstruction, unrest, and political upheaval. Liam had become a symbol of resistance, a reluctant leader in a world that was still reeling from the truth. But the more he tried to help, the more he realized that the wounds of humanity's past were too deep to heal quickly. The alien threat had exposed the fractures within human society, and now those fractures were widening. The governments that had once ruled the world were crumbling, and new, radical factions were rising. Some wanted to rebuild society from the ground up, while others were bent on vengeance, eager to eradicate those who had been complicit in the alien conspiracy. Liam found himself in the middle of it all, trying to keep the peace while grappling with his own anger and grief. He knew that the real fight was not just against the remnants of the alien forces, but against the darkness within humanity itself. The truth had come out, but with it came the realization that humanity was its own worst enemy. As Liam sat in a dimly lit room, surrounded by maps and documents, he felt the weight of the decisions that lay ahead. The world had changed, and with it, the rules. There was no going back to the old ways. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Liam would have to fight not only for humanity's survival, but for its soul. The day finally came, when Liam was forced to confront the remnants of the alien collaborators. A new faction had risen, one that sought to take control of the alien technology left behind, and they were willing to do anything to ensure their dominance. Liam knew that this faction was dangerous, not just because of their access to alien tech, but because they represented everything that had gone wrong in the world. They were determined to seize power at any cost, even if it meant plunging the world into further chaos. Liam had no choice but to face them. The time for diplomacy had passed, and now it was time for a reckoning. The final battle wasn't just against the alien forces, it was against the darkness that still lingered within the hearts of humanity. As Liam prepared to confront the leaders of this new faction, he realized that he was no longer just a symbol. He was a part of this new world, for better or worse, and the choices he made now would shape the future of the human race. There was no going back from this. The fight for humanity's soul had begun. The final confrontation was fierce. Liam fought with everything he had, but as the dust settled and the last of the faction leaders were captured or defeated, he felt no sense of victory. The battle for Earth's future had been won, but at a heavy cost. The city was in ruins once more, and the survivors were left to pick up the pieces. There was no going back to the old world. The alien threat had been defeated, but the scars they had left on humanity would never fade. The factions, the lies, the manipulation, they had all played their part in this war, and now it was up to the people to rebuild. Liam stood in the aftermath, surrounded by the bodies of the fallen, both human and alien. There was no celebration, no relief. Only the silence of a world forever changed. As he looked out over the city, he realized that humanity's true challenge lay ahead. They would rebuild, yes, but they would have to do it together. The future was uncertain, but it was theirs to shape. And Liam, though exhausted and scarred by the journey, knew that the fight for humanity's soul was far from over. The war may have ended, but the struggle for peace, unity, and survival would continue.